So now that we have some units set, I think it's a good time for us to get into making some precise lines. We can start by selecting the line tool. As you can recall, we can either do that by moving up to the ribbon and selecting the line tool, left clicking, or typing L and hitting enter. Now before we specify the first point, like the command line is telling us to, we're going to turn our tooltip back on because those numbers are going to be really helpful for us. So as you might recall, we're going to hit F12, and there it is. Now let's pick any point. We'll left click, and just like that, we begin drawing our line. Now as you can see, the tooltip is trying to keep track exactly what the length of line is that we're drawing, but we want to keep those numbers specific. So here's what we're going to do, and here's why it's good that the tooltip is on. Let's type 1500 in the command line. Now because AutoCAD can already see which direction we're gesturing for this line to go in, all we're really doing is specifying its distance. So now that we've got 1500 typed in, we're going to hit enter, and that completes the line. Now I'll move my cursor towards the top, which AutoCAD automatically assumes to be vertical, at least in relation to the XY coordinate that it's giving us here. So as long as we keep following the green tracking vector that AutoCAD is giving us, we're essentially drawing a line that's going to be vertical. Let's try typing 500 this time. We'll type 500 and hit enter, and we've got a line that's perfectly aligned with the green tracking vector that we see here. We'll move back to the left here. So we can move, now we've got a horizontal tracking vector. We'll type whichever you like, 2000, 2000, and hit enter, and that'll produce that. Now you can also use this feature to move along not just a specific horizontal or vertical line, but really any line that you want. Like let's say I want to move in this direction anywhere up here, and I've got this cursor sort of in this direction, and I'll try typing 4000, 4000, so you guys can see just how far this can extend, and I hit enter. Oh, let's zoom out. Perfect. So as you can see, it stuck with the direction that I gave it, and it produced the distance that I wanted. You can also produce angled lines very easily, and I'll show you guys how that's done. First, let's create a nice simple flat line just so you have something to compare it to. Let's move down this way. We'll make it a vertical line. We'll use the vertical tracking tool, and we'll say it's 1500, 1500. You can tell I like that number, and hit enter. Instead of typing the number 45, what you're going to do instead is you're going to go on your keyboard and you're going to hit the less than key. It's just to the right of the M key. And then you're going to type 45, 4, 5, and hit enter. Now as you can see, I can move that all around. I can move my cursor any which way, and it's still maintaining that 45-degree angle, which is exactly what we want. So now I'll type a number. We'll say 500, and it's going to produce a length as soon as I hit enter, 500 millimeters of length at 45 degrees, at least in relation to the XY coordinate plane that we have in this AutoCAD file. So we hit enter, and there you have it. I'll just do one more for a quick demonstration. We'll draw a nice flat line first to give you something to work from. We'll make this 700, 700, and hit enter. And this time, let's make a line of 30 degrees. So once more from the top, we're going to find the less than symbol, which is just to the right of the M. In this case, AutoCAD takes it to mean angle. You're going to hold Shift and then the less than key, so that'll produce the angle. We'll type 30, and hit enter. And now AutoCAD knows we want to draw a 30-degree angle. Let's make this length, I don't know, 1000. It doesn't matter. 1000, and hit enter. And there we have it. Now, I think now's a fine time to get out of here and look at something else. So let's hit enter, as you recall, to complete our line. Enter. We're going to take a moment to talk about tracking, specifically polar tracking. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to move over to the status bar, left click the drop-down menu just to the right of restrict cursor to specific angles. Luckily, polar tracking is already on, but we're going to talk about it for a moment first. When we move down to the status bar, we're going to take a look at this icon here, the circle with the angle out of it. That's the polar tracking. Polar tracking is currently on, and we're going to essentially discuss what it can do for us. Let's move over to the drop-down arrow to the right of it. Left click. Now currently the tracking is set to 90 degrees. We're going to change it so that it is instead in multiples of 30, as you can see right here. So now it's going to be in multiples of 30, being 60, 90, 120, and so forth. So now if I go to make a line, I'm going to move up to the ribbon, left click, and start one anywhere. So I'll left click and release. And as you can see, it'll still let me essentially track to a horizontal line on the x-axis, left click. But now, as I rotate, it automatically wants to snap to one of those nice multiples of 30 degrees, whether it's 30, 60, 90, 120, just like that. Now I'll move it up to 60, and as you can see, it wants to stay along that tracked line of 60. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type 2000, and that's going to produce a line that's along that tracking vector of 60 degrees and at a length of 2000 millimeters. Hit enter, and that's what it produces for us. And I'll hit enter again just to get away from this. Let's say we want to change it back to having our vectors at 90 degrees for vector tracking. So we're just going to move back down here, left click the drop down menu. We're going to move it up to 90, 180, 270, and so forth. So those are all multiples of 90 degrees. We'll left click, and essentially it's back the way it was before. And I can demonstrate very quickly here that, as you can see it wants to either be at 0 degrees or 90 degrees, 180, 270, and so forth. Yeah, just like that. Now let's say you want to turn polar tracking off completely. I'll show you how it's done and essentially what happens. We just move down to the status bar, left click, and now it's turned off. Now watch this. I'll select my line tool again, left click, begin one anywhere, left click, and now look, it's not giving us any sort of indication as to where the vector is in terms of degree direction. So that's what essentially happens, and that's what you get when you turn that off. Now, as you can see, that also reflects what anything in the status bar looks like when it's turned off. You can see these other commands, like snapping reference lines, 2D reference points, or the grid. You can see that those are all on currently, as they're demarcated in blue. And if we want to see that this is turned back on, we just move back over to it. We left click, and now it's back on again, just like that. Now, a fairly easy command that's based on the status bar here is Ortho Mode. And I'll show you how this one works, and it's quite simple. You'd simply left click, and it automatically shifts away from polar tracking. You left click Ortho Mode, and watch what happens when I try to draw a line. Here, I'll use a command, L-I-N-E, and hit enter. We'll specify first point. Now look at this. It'll only let me draw in multiples of 90 degrees. So this can be useful if you want something that is geometrically never strays outside of perfect 90-degree lines. Ortho Mode is very, very easy to access. If you just hit enter, then you want to move towards Ortho Mode, and if you want to turn it off, you simply left click and you can reselect polar tracking. Another particularly useful tool for drawing is the dynamic input tool. The dynamic input tool can be reached by doing the thing we did before and bringing up the tooltips by hitting F12. As you might recall, once you have your line selected, left click, you can access the tooltip by hitting F12, which essentially serves the same purpose as dynamic inputs. Now, for those of you who prefer not to use F12, you should also be able to access dynamic input on your status bar here. Now, here's essentially how you do it. You'll notice here you don't see anything relating to dynamic input. Here's how we fix that. We're going to bring our cursor all the way over to the bottom right corner here where we've got customization. So now we're going to customize our status bar down here. We're going to left click. We're going to move all the way up to right here, dynamic input this is what we're looking for. We're going to left click, and just like that, now we've customized our status bar. So as we covered before, I left click and now it's not active, but then I click again, you see the blue box around it, and it's active. Perfect. Now that dynamic input is active, we're going to move up to the line tool and see how we can use it. We'll move up to line tool on the ribbon, left click, and just like that, all of our tooltips are available for us to see. Now let's left click, and as you can see, it's giving us the option for how long we want the length to be. So let's, use 1800, 1800. Now instead of hitting enter, what we're going to hit instead is tab. So we're going to hit the tab key just to the left of Q and a couple keys below the escape. Tab. Now it produced the line of 1800 length, and it's freezing it at that length. But now we need to specify the degree angle. So we'll call this 65. Type 65, as you can see there, and we're going to hit enter. And just like that, we've used dynamic input to produce this specific line at a specific angle. If you want to produce additional lines in addition to that one, you can very easily. So again, using dynamic inputs, we'll call this one 700 in length. Hit the tab key one more time, hit 45 degrees, type 4 and 5, and hit enter. And then we can add as many unique angles as we wish. Here, let's try a little bit of a different one. Let's try one at 1500, 1500, hit tab, the tab key, and as you can see here, it lets us create an angle that goes all the way around from the x-axis. Let's see what happens when we type 270 for 270 degrees. 270 and hit enter. Perfect. So it knows that in relation to the x-axis, it knows where 270 is, and it'll produce a line at the correct length and the correct angle.